Hello and welcome to episode 144 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam,
I'm Sahil.
and we are recording for the third week in a row. It's season's back in season here, and we are fresh off of the 2024 prospect draft, and it really lived up to the hype, I feel like. It was a really interesting draft.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of activity during the draft. I mean, there was no trade of the first overall pick this year, but lots of trades that went down both before and during the draft. Lots of interesting picks. We hit on quite a few of them early on, but then it kind of got uh, really unpredictable really fast. But there were some really good picks that were made. And I know we're excited to talk about them. It's always a fun night when we all get together and draft, and this one was no exception.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of deals were made. Some floodgates were kind of open. A lot of teams moving around throughout the draft, trying to find where they want to be. Um, some teams, some teams decided even after they made their picks that they weren't happy with it and traded it for a different pick. We'll be talking about all that, but little bit of housekeeping. A couple of trades were made before the draft. First and foremost, you acquired Lucas Giolito for Bo Naylor and your 2024 second, which was pick 23. Um, yeah, why don't you talk through that deal? Bo Naylor, um, you you've been saying all offseason you're going to trade Bo Naylor for a pitcher, and you have now traded Bo Naylor for a pitcher.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, you posted in the Slack a screenshot of a message I sent you saying that exact thing. But not only that, I did allude to the fact as soon as I made the trade that I already had a plan for what I was going to do with Bo Naylor. And the plan the entire time, my first thought was I want to trade him to Connor. Because Connor needs a young catcher. He has Sal Perez currently, and I think at the time he had Ryan Jeffers, but um uh he's gonna age out. And Connor has some interesting mid-tier pitching that I think was roughly worth the value of Bo Naylor. Um, and I decided I wanted to get him from him. So I had actually targeted somebody else initially. I won't reveal the name, but we ended up settling on Giolito instead. But I'm very happy with this. So from Connor's perspective, he gets a young catcher. I don't really need Bo Naylor because I have Adley Rutschman. I know teams last year, particularly Andrew and Ruthvik, where and even you quite a bit were really successful running out the two catcher strategy, but it wasn't something I was super interested in doing. I really like Bo Naylor's bat. I did see a theory that the Guardians signing Austin Hedges might sap some of his playing time because they really like Hedges defensively, and like they've had him before, and he's sapped playing time from other catchers. But bottom line, I was ready to move off of Naylor at the end of the day. I thought he was kind of an expendable piece, but I had acquired him thinking he could be that guy to help me get a pitcher. In return, I get Giolito. Giolito, so I searched this up. Giolito on July 12th had a 3.45 ERA. The FIP and XFIP are a little higher, but not egregiously higher. He had a very solid strikeout rate. Walk rate was fine. July 12th was, I think, around the time of the All-Star break. It's also the day that his divorce got publicized. And after that day, he got traded twice. So he went from Chicago to LA, and he went from LA back across the country to Cleveland. That's hard. I mean, imagine going through a divorce and then getting traded twice. I mean, I remember a similar situation with Josh Hader, not a divorce, but his wife had issues with her pregnancy right when he got traded from Milwaukee to San Diego, and he struggled. So I think we forget sometimes that like these players are human too, and when they have stuff going on in their lives, it affects them. So not that I give him a complete pass, like, and just be like, hey, his second half struggles, like, didn't happen. Like, he's fine. But I did do some digging, and I do think kind of some of the underlying stats and some of the peripherals for, how he performed in the second half. were still very solid. He was running a ridiculously high BABIP. I think his homer nine rate will go down. That's what really got him this year. He had like a three homer nine in I think in Cleveland and maybe also in LA, like a similarly high number. So um do I think he's going to be Ace Giolito again, who like I think people were talking about as like a top 50 dynasty asset? I'm not necessarily sure. Do I think he is a very solid, at least like mid rotation starter in a dynasty rotation? Yeah, and that's pretty much what I'm counting on him to do. I'm really happy with my top five and Cole, Noah, Fried, Gallen, and Bradish. And if he can fall kind of in that range where like Nestor Cortez and Braxton Garrett are on my team right now, then this will have been a worthwhile move. And anything else he does beyond that would be a plus. I mean, if he can get back to his old form, this is an absolute steal for me. And I like gambling on that upside kind of at the end of my rotation.
Hmm. I get that. Yeah, I'm not the biggest Giolito fan. I get it. Maybe it makes sense there was something going on mentally there. It's certainly possible. I'm not convinced you're gonna have him on opening day. Um,
Interesting. Okay. I fully intend to have him on opening day,
you
barring.
said that about Bo Naylor publicly.
Yeah, but I lied about that one. I knew I was lying about that one publicly. I'm not lying about this one publicly.
That's what you would have said about Bo Naylor publicly.
I, I did tell you behind the scenes I was going to trade him. So,
Okay, well, we'll see what you say behind the scenes after this episode.
all right. All right. That's fair. I spent a lot of time talking about Lucas Giolito and Bo Naylor. Connor also got 23 in that trade, and I think that's a good segue to our next trade. Connor immediately traded that pick to Jake for Tyler Soderstrom. And I don't know if this is on air. I don't know if this is off the air, but we talked about this last week. I told you Jake should trade Tyler Soderstrom for a second round pick. He has no use for him. He has first baseman on his roster, and some team that's a losing team should take the gamble on him. And I think that this is a perfect trade for both sides. Jake was able to draft a prospect who I know he likes quite a bit. And I think Soderstrom, well, I'm not super high on him, I think is a solid gamble for Connor. What say you?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a fine deal. Soderstrom, yeah, is someone that I have owned. He's kind of on the downswing, but Connor's team is on the downswing and kind of trying to buy into some Soderstrom hype and see if he can put together a good season here. I think that's a fine gamble for Connor. Um, and yeah, Jake got Chase Davis. He's someone I have owned in Gallardo. Probably he's not quite good enough to make the prospect cut in that league, but certainly a fine prospect for this league.
Absolutely, and we'll get into some of these prospects that were drafted later. I know there's a couple of pick for player trades, but we'll dive into some of those players a bit more when we do our draft recap segment. But this next trade was really interesting. This one went down right before the draft, I believe. Yeah, right before the draft. Actually, sorry, during the draft, but it was not a pick trade. Uh, Ruthvik traded George Springer to Jake for Mackenzie Gore, Gabriel Gonzalez, and Jake's 2027 third. I have a very strong opinion about this trade, but before I make that opinion, I'm curious to hear what you think first.
Yeah, so that it is an interesting deal. Yeah, Ruthvik got in return Mackenzie Gore, Gabriel Gonzalez, and a third. Um, I don't know. I don't know if I love his return. George Springer, he's kind of uh I haven't heard a lot about him the last year or two, and he is 34 now. It was a bit of a down year for him, but he's coming off a 2022 season where he had a 133 WRC plus and he had a 342 on base. This year, a lot of the power seemed gone a little bit. He still hit 21 homers, but Yeah, some of the extra base hits, the slugging was down by quite a bit, and the batting average was down. I don't know. I still think it's a solid deal. I don't really care about Gabriel Gonzalez. Mackenzie Gore is interesting. And he had what sort of season? I know he had a hot start this past year. Yeah, he was just kind of eh. He walks a few too many guys. Although the home run luck is probably gonna swing his way, so maybe 2024 is a bit of a breakout season for him. I could buy it. I guess I don't have strong opinions on this trade, and I guess I'm not sure what your strong opinions on this trade would be.
Yeah, I Ruthvik initially chatted me and he's like, "Hey, I have the opportunity to get Mackenzie Gore for George Springer." And I'm like, "That's the light return. I think you could do better." And then he gets Gabriel Gonzalez in the trade as well. I'm not a big Mackenzie Gore guy. The walk rate's really high. Is a 376 this year, and he had a 178 homer per nine. Now, a 178 homer per nine uh is really high, or just not good at all. And it's I know you said that, hey, like I think there's gonna be some luck. If you look at the StatCast numbers behind it, I'm not necessarily sure that it's just a matter of some luck changing and that's gonna, get the numbers down. StatCast, if it ever loads here, it's loaded. His but it hasn't loaded. Okay. His barrel percentage, he was in the first percentile. His hard hit was in the 18th percentile. He's a pretty big fly ball pitcher. His ground ball percentage was only 30th. Uh it's just it's not it just feels like I don't know what the solution is for him to cut down that rate. And individually, that home run rate being high is fine if he's not walking a lot of batters. If he's just giving up a bunch of solo home runs, that's fine. But then when he has a 376 walk per nine, and when he's putting a lot of batters on base, like by base hits, and that's evidenced by the high barrel rate. And his whip was like one. I'm pulling it up right now. It was 140 last year. I mean, it feels like a recipe for disaster. Now, do I think he can make some improvements? He's 24, sure. But I don't think that the price should have been an outfielder that, for all his flaws last year, still hit 21 homers, had 20 stolen bases. 327 OBP is not great, but it's fine. He had 87 runs, 72 ribbies. Like those are solid. And he was able to stay healthy. Like I get George Springer's on the downswing, but I think Ruthvik could have gotten a little more. And I told him, I was like, I wonder if you should just hold on to him for the first couple months of the season, right? If he starts out hot, like, performs like he did in pretty much every season before 23, like you're going to be able to get a lot more for him. I didn't really see why there was just this sudden rush for Ruthvik to trade him, especially because, he needs bats. We've talked about this quite a bit, so I didn't like this trade for him. I think Gabriel Gonzalez is a fine prospect, but nobody like that I think really closes the gap for me. And the third round pick's the third round pick, so maybe it's not as bad as I'm making it out to be. But if Ruthvik was a rebuilding team, it would make sense. He's coming off a semis appearance. I don't know why now is the time for him just to get off of George Springer, unless he truly believes that like George Springer is about to just bottom out. But I think for him, this is more about acquiring Gore and his interest in him than like anything super negative on Springer. So that's my take on the situation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I know you're kind of higher on Springer than most people in the league, because you've owned Springer multiple times, like 4 or 8 different times.
Only
Um,
twice, but yeah.
only twice. But yeah, and I think Gore, I'm not like expecting him to break out this year. I could see it happening. I wouldn't be surprised. Um, but yeah, I think it's probably better deal. Uh, better deal for Jake than it is for Ruthvik. I just don't have the strong feelings about it that you do.
Yeah, I just wish now, and maybe there's not something I'm seeing here, but like if I could see something that was like, hey, Mackenzie Gore is doing this, or if I could see something underlined that makes me think he's going to make these changes, or that I mean, I'm not, nothing's guaranteed, but even something that would suggest that that could happen, I think I'd be in. I just after doing a deeper dive on him and not convinced that that's there. So that's my take on it, but. Yeah, I think your take is very fair as well. Transitioning here, Ruthvik was involved in another outfield trade. He traded Starling Marte uh to EBO for the 28th overall pick. We'll talk about that pick again here in a second. That ended up being one of the more interesting picks in the draft for a number of reasons. But uh, let's talk about EBO's return of Starling Marte. What's your thought?
Yeah, so Starling Marte, um, uh, I know EBO was trying to shop him for the pre couple days preceding the draft. I had kind of declined in,
Ruthvik
or
was.
Ruthvik, yeah, Ruthvik was trying to shop him a couple days before draft. So that's two outfielders that Ruthvik traded away on draft day. He, the speed was still there. He stole 24 bases, but uh, he just really bottomed out at the plate. He's 34. The hard hit rate actually wasn't that bad this year. He hit the ball. Let me look at his StatCast page. Um, the numbers are fine. They're kind of a lighter blue, so it's not like he's 10th percentile. It is certainly a drop from 2022. Um, yeah, so it's definitely a bit of a decrease there at the plate. I think he's probably better than he was in 2023. So maybe it's a decent bounce back candidate for EBO, especially since he's still getting the steals. And it really wasn't that much that they gave up to get him. I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's a fine buy low for EVO. I have no issues with that. I know he's older, and he's coming off a bad year, but he had 132 and 134 WRC plus the 2 seasons before that. And he only played, despite playing 86 games last year, 24 stolen bases. So I'm not suggesting he's going to suddenly go and steal 40 like that monster year he had split between what was it, Miami and Oakland when he had 47. I swore he stole like 3 bases every game when he was with Oakland, but um I think he could be a sneaky source of steals. I wouldn't be surprised if EBO flips him again. But I thought about taking a gamble on him late because in a trade like that, I don't really have the roster space. But if he bounces back even to like a league average WRC plus with the stolen bases and the little bit of pop he can add, like I think he could be a decent asset. Maybe as like an outfielder 5 for a team.
All right. And yeah, quickly, before we get into the main segment here, there was one more trade. Um, Drew Thorpe was traded by Ruthvik to Daniel Matt for pick number 32 and Jeremy Pena. Jeremy Pena has bounced around quite a bit the last 2 years. He's 26. He had an okay season at shortstop. Um, Fine major leaguer, not sure he has the most fantasy upside.
Yeah, I've never been a Jeremy Pena guy. I I mean, even that one year, his rookie year when he had 22 homers and 11 steals, like that looked great, but it came with a 3.9% walk rate, a 24.2% K rate, and a 289 OBP. That's very yucky. This year he almost
Very yucky.
doubled, yeah, very yucky indeed. This year he almost doubled the walk rate and he cut the strikeout rate by 4 points, but his ISO went down. So it's a 324 OBP, which is a lot more palatable, but he only hit 10 home runs. Uh, so it like strikes me as like it's like an okay gamble, especially at cheap. but he's just never going to be a guy I'm interested in. I don't really see the appeal. Um, I get it for Ruthvik, like, hey, he's a young middle infield, like trying to get a little younger. I just traded away two outfielders. Let's gamble on him. But like he doesn't do much for me. I think Drew Thorpe is an interesting prospect, uh, who I think the bellies or they're not the bellies anymore, whatever they are now.
They haven't been the bellies in a long time.
Well, they haven't been to Bellies in like a year because Bellinger signed with the Cubs. But shit, what are they now? I should know this.
The Drury of your peers.
Jury of your peers, thank you. I really like Drew Thorpe as a prospect, and I think they did a really nice job getting him. So I think this is a sneaky nice trade for them.
Okay. Yeah, I have no more comments on it. So are we ready to move on to the main event here?
Yes, and that is that Heliot Ramos has finally been cut.
That's right. Heliot Ramos has finally been cut. Another yellow square is gone. We are going to one of these next couple of weeks kind of use this as a way of kind of breaking down what we've how the yellow squares have gone since last year when we predicted how they would go. Heliot Ramos, the yellow square, no more. Ruthvik cut him as part of the it was as part of the Springer trade, right? That he cut him.
Yes, I think it was post Springer trade that he cut him because he cut him in the middle of the draft. And then Jake picked him up kind of as a meme, and actually Jake offered him to me for the last pick in the draft. I still have that chat sitting in my in Slack. Um, but good riddance. I mean, Ruthvik should have gotten rid. I mean, we've been telling him to get rid of Heliot Ramos for like 3 years now, maybe more, maybe since the league started. Like, I don't know. Fuck.
Yeah, he was officially the 15th uh
To
to
last.
final,
Yeah.
yellow box, 15th to final guy left on their old team from the original draft. There are now 14 guys left from the original draft. Our consensus pick is that Matt Manning will be the next one to go, and I could see it. I think that still sounds about right.
Yeah, I think EVO is going to give him quite a leash, but it's one of those things where, if Zane seems really interested in competing for the sixth seed this year, which I think is correct. But if they don't compete, I could see him holding on to Manning and through if he struggles and kind of let that play out. I will say that we both picked our 14th player or 14th the last player to be Chris Bryant. So there are others ahead of him still, but we both picked 14th to be Chris Bryant, and I think you're going to cut Chris Bryant this year.
Cut him. I don't think I'll cut him entirely.
I mean, if he has another injury prone year where he's not really hitting, I think it might be time.
I don't know. We'll see about that. But yeah, there are a few guys ahead of him that still need to be cut first, certainly.
So let's actually move on to the other main event, the draft. Not quite as exciting as Heliot Ramos, but we did it. So congratulations, y'all.
We did it. Yeah, number one was not traded like we thought it was. Speaking of we did it,
No,
we
you thought one would be traded. I didn't think one would be traded. I want that on the record.
all right. Well,
Thank you.
then I correctly picked the first 8 picks in the draft. We did not do that. I did that.
You did not make pick number 8. I predicted pick number 8. So you correctly predicted the first 7.
All right. Well, I would have picked 8 and 9 correctly because I was the one who made them in real life. So really, I don't,
Okay,
you
well
know.
that's cheating, That's you're no better than the 2017 Astros.
But yeah, it's a very chalky first round, I would say. A pretty chalky start to the draft. Um, Paul Skeens at 3 is what I predicted, but it seemed like a couple people were surprised by that.
I
First
was.
9, yeah. Zane got Cruz at 4, which was exciting for him. I'm very happy with the names I took. But the first 9 pretty Pretty straightforward until we got to 10, I think. But let's kind of go through them one by one here. The way we normally have done this in the past, we kind of break down the first round, and then kind of break down the interesting names the rest of the way. The first round, we kind of broke it down last week before the draft, so maybe we'll do this a little bit differently.
Yeah,
Let's talk about those
let's go
first.
more in depth in the other rounds. I mean, let's go more in depth at the end of the first round and the other rounds. I think the first seven picks went exactly as we thought the first seven picks would be. Do you have any dispute about how those went?
No, I think yeah, Jake's got Yamamoto in his rotation. That's very exciting for him. EBO now has two very exciting outfield prospects uh, to go along with Jackson Chorio, Chase DeLauder, Kevin Alcantara. They've been offering up Kevin Alcantara in some deals, by the way.
I saw that. Yeah. You haven't even mentioned Justin Crawford and Max Clark yet. I mean,
Yeah, well, I was including Max Clark in with the
oh
guys they took
yeah,
this time,
okay,
but
yeah, okay, that's true. Yeah, that's I mean that's a stacked outfield group there of prospects. I mean, I'm sure some of them are going to be guys that they end up trading to kind of fill some other holes. I know they have a big hole at second base and a big hole at catcher they want to fill, but like for now, I mean that's got to be by far the top outfield prospect group in the league, and it's not particularly close.
oh, absolutely. No, I
Yeah,
think you're definitely right about that.
yeah,
Um, I like my outfield group too, but we're not gonna get into that right this second.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so they made some good picks. Nothing in particular I want to mention about the first several, other than I'll say, I like my picks a lot. You mocked Hurston Waldrop to me. I just decided, you know, I I liked Brock Wilkins' profile too much as, the third base type. Power hitting third baseman, but unlike a Nolan Gorman or Mark Reynolds, he doesn't come with a strikeout baggage. It
Yeah.
kind of reminded me a lot of Chris Bryant coming out of college. Um,
You do have a
and
type.
I do, hey, pre-injury Chris Bryant was good enough to be picked fourth in the inaugural draft. So if I can get a couple of those seasons out of Brock Wilken, I would be ecstatic.
Yeah, I mean, so I think you took the eighth and ninth players on my board. I didn't officially put together a board. I kind of had a loose board, but those two were eight and nine. So and one through seven had gone before that. So I think you made the top picks that were left on the board. Um, I mocked Waldrop to you, kind of trying to read your mind a bit and thinking that, you might want him because you kind of need some pitching and you traded away Tiedemann. And I kind of thought maybe you traded Tiedemann thinking that you were going to trade for a pitcher or draft a pitcher. Um, but I think you made the right decision. But I know it was a close one for you. I mean, it sounded like, I mean, I know last week you alluded to the fact that there were four names that you were debating, and I think you told me off air that like even as of the day of the draft, you weren't entirely sure who you were going to take with that second pick.
Yeah, I really wasn't. So I was kind of between um, Emerson, Wilkin, Waldrop, and Tommy Troy. At one point, week before the draft, Tommy Troy was perhaps my pick at number 8 overall. Um, he ended up kind of being the first guy eliminated. When I read more about Emerson, he kind of became the guy that I wanted at 8. And then for number 9, I was really between the other two, Wilkin and Waldrop. And I just couldn't really get over the strikeout rate for Waldrop. Um, I was kind of going through, looking through college baseball stats, looking
Did
at
you mean to
top.
say the walk rate?
Yeah, did I say strikeout?
Yeah, you said strikeout, right? Yeah, the walk rate for Waldrop.
Yeah, the walk. That is hard to say. I'll just say strikeout again, and maybe we can dub it in. Um, uh,
Right.
he walks too many guys. He walked a lot of guys in college. I looked through some stats of like top tier SEC pitchers from the past 10 years, and none of them really walked as many guys as Waldrop. Um, and got picked early. Um, Now, to be fair, none of them has had four potential plus pitches like Waldrop did, so that's definitely his big selling point and why I almost went with him anyway. I think Andrew got a good pick there. He's just, got to get that walk rate down, and I didn't want to end up feeling frustrated over that.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And I think, I generally, when I have a tie in terms of players that I have ranked on my draft board, I usually go with the hitter as opposed to the pitcher. We just answered the age-old question, podcast over. Congratulations. But yeah, so I think you made the right move there. I did have Wilkin a little ahead of Waltrip on my board either way, but I do think that um, I think this worked out for you. I think you made two home run picks. I think it's going to work out very well for you. And it's like I said last week, like in any other draft, FYPD year, I think that these guys could have easily gone like 5 and 6 or 4 and 5. So I think for you to get them at 8 and 9 was a great steal. But this is a great transition. Speaking of the age-old question of the pitcher and a hitter, Alex made what I thought was the first surprise pick at number 10. He took a hitter and a pitcher. He took Bryce Eldridge. I know I was a little surprised that was the pick at 10. What say you about that pick?
Yeah, I was definitely surprised also. I mean, I know he made a surprise pick at 1 in 2023 that worked out for him tremendously well. And that was his only pick last year in the draft. Um, I I don't know. I had a much lower grade on Bryce Eldridge. I kind of had him as a second round, mid-second round talent. So him going at 10 was a really big shock to me. Um, I don't know if he buys into the two-way potential, then I mean the sky's the limit for Eldridge. I'm not sure if he plans on kind of continuing with the two-way thing through the Myers, uh like Brendan McKay did, or dropping it instantly like Hunter Green did. Tough to say. He did only hit in his limited amount of time in the minors this past year, and he had fine. Striker rate's a little high, but he walks a lot, and he's got a ton of power. So he certainly, even if he's just a hitter, could be a very valuable one. I haven't seen much of his pitching numbers, but there's some intrigue there for sure. I think it's a bit of a reach, but it's a bold one.
Yeah. So my feeling on this is, yeah, I think you could argue it's a little bit of a reach. I think once you kind of get to that like range of like 10 to 18, I think everybody kind of, that's when things start to split a little bit from the consensus, and then that's where I think you start to see people have a little more individualized rankings. So I don't necessarily have an issue with Alex taking him at 10 because of that. I personally wouldn't have taken him at 10. Like, but I think if we had this conversation when in a world where he had 14, I think we would have been like, yeah, this is fair. So like I don't think 4 picks makes that much of a difference, and that's where his pick was. He wasn't gonna pick again, so he wanted his guy. I think that's fine. Um, I think it feels like a really big upside play with the two-way kind of status of Eldridge. And when he was drafted, he was announced as both a pitcher and a hitter, which leads me to think the Giants are at least going to give him the opportunity to do both. I mean, you're right, he did only hit to end the year. Uh but I'm reading an article on the Athletic right now that's like he's expected to get opportunities on the mound in the spring, and the Giants clearly see Eldridge as a hitting prospect who can also pitch. But I do wonder if they're like, hey, like you pitched in to end your season, right? Like, and I forget, is he a high school guy or a college guy? I should know this.
I think he was a
High school.
yeah,
So uh he probably pitched quite a bit there, and they're like, hey, like we don't need you to do too much. It's not a full minor league season. You could just hit, that's fine, like season over. So um the upside is high. I mean, we see the impact that Ohtani, has on Eric's team. And I'm not saying that Eldridge is going to be Ohtani, but if he can hit and pitch competently, I think that's a difference maker on any roster. You're able to roster an extra hitter, an extra pitcher, basically. And given the depth of Alex's farm system, uh, and the fact that he drafted Wyatt Langford at 1, so I think he already got a home run pick there. I think he is uniquely positioned to take on a gamble like Eldridge.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
And I'll
Uh,
say one last thing, even if he doesn't pitch, I still think he's a solid prospect as a hitter. So I
yes.
still think that's fair. Yeah.
hmm Absolutely. Andrew took Waldrop at 11. Yeah, I think he's the best pick at 11. For all that we've said about him, he is a really highly regarded prospect. And then he took Leo DeVries at number 12, which I find very interesting. And it sounded like Yuki really wanted him as well. He was hoping to get him at 14, from what I heard.
Yeah, Yuki chatted me as soon as Andrew made the pick, and he's like, "Damn," he's like, "The guy I wanted fell, or did not fall." And it's interesting. We'll talk about later why I think that's particularly interesting, but um, uh, I think Andrew made two very solid picks here. I think they were two of the top players left on the board. I think there was another player still in that tier that was available that I would have considered as well. Maybe two, you could argue. I had mocked Shota Imanaga to him, and Andrew in pre-draft conversations with me. Now, granted, this wasn't like immediately before the draft. I think this was a few weeks ago or like a month before. Had mentioned that he was interested in Imanaga at 11. He was asking me if I thought that Imanaga would fall there, which I told him I did. So I was pretty convinced that Imanaga was going to be one of his picks, and I thought, hey, this makes a lot of sense. Andrew's still looking for pitching, in the rotation especially. And Imanaga is a major league ready pitcher who's going to step right in, and I thought that that was a direction he was going to go in. That being said, like I think he made two great picks here, so I can't. I don't. I don't have any issues with it, but I thought it was interesting.
Absolutely. So moving on to round number two now. I don't know if we want to go in order or what. I guess we'll start no, because it's some interesting trades here. Took Chase Dollander at 13, which kind of felt like a very big surprise to a lot of people. I don't know about you. I was a little bit surprised by that pick.
Yeah, and we can group this with Connor's other pick in a round. I think Connor made the best pick in the round and the worst pick in the round. He took Kyle
hmm
Teal at 18. I think for him to get Kyle Teal at 18 was a steal. I thought Kyle Teal, I mean, I mocked him to go at the end of the first round. I thought he was going to go end of the first round, early second round. For him to get him at 18 was fantastic. This Dollander pick, like Dollander, I thought maybe would go at the end of the third round. Just that the whole
hmm
Colorado landing spot I can't get over. I don't want to draft Rockies pitchers. And if he really liked Dollander, that's fine. Like I don't have an issue with him drafting him because he believes in the talent. I players get traded all the time. I would rather, draft for the talent and then go from there. But I think you also have to understand your draft room, and I think you have to understand the perception of people when it's like, hey, it's a pitcher that was drafted by the Rockies. That player shoots down everybody's draft board automatically. It doesn't matter who the pitcher is for the most part, right? So and Dollander's not special enough where I think he is not immune to the cores effect. So I think if Connor would have read the room a bit, I think he could have realized, hey, I could probably wait on Dollander until later. He had a couple third round picks. So I didn't get that pick.
Yeah, so it sounded like Andrew, and I may have heard wrong. It sounded like Andrew was hoping to get him at 22, so maybe he wouldn't have lasted until the third round. I think it would have looked better if, say, Connor took Teal at 13 and Dollander at 18. That may have, I would have been more fine with that. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Dollander at 13 though, considering some of the names he could have gotten, including um, some of the pitching names he could have gotten.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. If Teal went at 13, I would have said this is a great pick. This is exactly where he should have gone. If Dollander would have went at 18, I would have been like, yeah, this is a bit of a reach. But you're getting kind of into that point of the draft where it's like, again, things are kind of there's a wide variety. And if he thought Andrew was going to take him, Andrew had the 19th pick too. So if he thought Andrew would snipe him at 19, then fine. Like I don't have an issue with securing your guy. Yeah, and I trust Connor to have done his research. So if he sees something in Dollander, I have no issue with that. I just wouldn't have taken him at 13.
I agree. Yuki took Jung-Hoo Lee at 14, which I know we were both kind of lower on Jung-Hoo Lee. Yuki, I mean, even I think we were both higher on Imanaga than Lee, and we think, Yuki needing a starting pitcher, Imanaga would have made sense if he wants to take a established major leaguer. Might have made more sense than Jung-Hoo Lee, where Yuki's already got a decent number of outfielders. Um, so that kind of felt like a bit of a reach at 14 as well. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jung Ho Lee is one of those guys who's going to have a wide range of outcomes. I don't think him going to 14 is a ridiculous reach or anything. I mean, I fully expected him to go somewhere in the mid to late second round, so I don't think 14 is too off base. I didn't even think about the Imanaga angle of it, but I agree. Like that seemed like such a slam dunk type of pick for Yuki. Uh, with his need to rotate. I mean, his offense is very solid. Like it's a playoff caliber offense. His pitching staff is probably the worst, second worst pitching staff in the league. I think Daniel Matz is worse, but it's the second worst in the league. He's not going to make the playoffs with the pitching staff that he has right now. He needs something. Now, if he doesn't believe in him and August talent, that's fine. But that's the direction I would have gone. Or honestly, I'm also surprised he, the Diamondback fan, did not take Tommy Troy if he wanted to go, the hitter. And Jake took him with the next pick, and I think that was a fantastic pick for Jake at 15. I think it just kind of fell into his lap.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially, yeah, considering there was a world where I took Tommy Troy at 8 or 9, getting him at 15. Um, yeah, I would have taken him at 11 if I had that pick. And I guess if Waldrop had gone 10th. Um,
Yeah,
so what I'm saying is he was 11th on my board. Yeah, I think getting him 15th is a really great deal for Jake, who had a great draft overall.
yeah, I think he could have gone as high as 10th, and I would have thought that was fine. So to get him at 15th, I think is really solid. These next two players, I mean, speaking of Imanaga, BBO did make a trade here. So the 16th overall pick was originally held by Yuki. I wonder if Yuki, on pure speculation here, I wonder if he thought he could get Tommy Troy at 16 after taking Lee. And then once he saw that Troy went, was willing to make this deal. But Imanaga was also on the board, so he must really not have wanted Imanaga because that's where he could have taken Imanaga here at 16. I think for him getting two major league ready players, from Japan would have been a ton of fun. But he traded that pick for two second round picks next year, Eric's 2025 second and your 2025 second with EBO. EBO took Rhett Lauder and Shota Imanaga. So you're the Reds fan. I'll let you talk about Rhett Lauder and just your thoughts about these two picks.
Yeah, I like Rhett Lauder. I think that's probably the right spot for him. He's his whole thing is he's a high floor guy, going to be up in the majors very quickly. Maybe not the best ceiling, maybe never going to be an ace, but he could be a very solid like number 4 starter in a fantasy rotation, number 2 starter in real life for a long time. Um, and that's something that'd be a great get there. And at the very least, he's almost certainly going to be a rosterable fantasy starting pitcher, which it's a great get. And Shota Imanaga is already a rosterable fantasy starting pitcher because he's in the majors right now. Um, yeah, I know Cubs fans were very excited to get him, and he was very excited to go to Chicago. Um, I think that's a pretty good spot for him, and I think they did pretty well with these two picks. Neither of them are, I guess, guys I'm amazingly excited about, but I think they made good picks back to back here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we both at the time the picks were made were like, hey, uh, maybe we have Noble Meyer higher on our boards, but I have no issue going with the college pitcher over the high school pitcher. The high school pitcher is my least favorite type of player to draft. While I think Meyer, from a pure talent perspective, might be better than Louder, I think Louder has a lot more stability. And to your point, where you say you think he's going to be a solid major league starter, like yeah, I tend to agree. So I have no issues there. Um, um, the Imanaga pick was a little more interesting to me. I do like that EBO and kind of making this push her to sixth seed is trying to get a little more major league ready with some of their assets. And they also have so many prospects and they draft. They already had two first round picks where they're like, hey, we don't really want to cut another prospect. So like I have no issue with this. I think that
Yeah, I think that's an angle I hadn't considered, but I agree that is smart to kind of, get a major league ready guy there that you don't have to waste a prospect sheet on because they need their prospect slots more than they need their major league spots at this point.
exactly. But yeah, so let's move on here. Andrew made a really interesting pick. We talked about the storyline before the draft. He took Nolan Shotwell at 19. Um, I was initially a little iffy about this because I thought he made more sense on a team that was rebuilding, who might be able to be a little more patient with Shotwell as he comes up early on here and kind of figures it out in the majors. But you had a really good point about the way that Andrew's team is constructed and why Shotwell makes a lot of sense for him. So I'll let you explain that.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, he just kind of fills a hole in Andrew's major league lineup right now. He slots right into that first base, third base slot. He doesn't have a lot of guys who play those positions at the major league level. So he's not even in a util slot in that corner infield slot from day one. And I think that kind of gives him the opportunity um to be a little bit patient with him because he's going to be better out there presumably than any of the guys who are on free agency. I would rather have Nolan Schanuel in my major league lineup right now than Wilmer Flores, Carlos Santana, Luis Rengifo. I like also, but kind of he's another young guy. He'll be third base eligible. Um, uh, I think he's a good player, but I think Sean O'Well's got higher upside. Anthony Rendon, he could add for that corner infield spot. I don't know. I like betting on Sean O'Well, and uh, and it may if it turns out it's May 1st and he's got to cut him, that would be a little bit annoying. But it's not if it's he's the 19th overall pick in the draft. I think that's certainly manageable.
Yeah, exactly. And it also helps that Andrew made two earlier first round picks. So, it's not like this is like the head of his draft here. And he also made another interesting second round pick here. And why don't we loop him in here? Braden Taylor, uh, third baseman from Tampa. Kind of in a sea of high school prospects that went. He was the one college bat that went. I really like this pick for him. I think Taylor's a solid prospect, and this is pretty much the exact range I thought he was going to land in.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of where I thought Braden Taylor would go as well. Um, yeah, he's just kind of always put up high on base percentages in college. Always like a college hitter who hits well in college. And he's another plate discipline guy. He does not chase a lot of pitches. And he's kind of speedy too. I think he's got potential to be one of the best picks of this round.
I agree. I really like those good plate discipline guys. I think that's one of those foundational skill sets. You can grow into power, but you have a hard time teaching. a good plate skill. So I agree with that. Honestly, and we can group these last four names in the first or the second round here together. Uh, I thought all four of those players were really solid gets. Nimala, Taylor, Chase Davis, and Aiden Miller, who went pretty much exactly where I thought they were going to go. I think Nimala, Davis, and Miller are all high school guys. I had kind of mid to late second round grades on all of them. I know you had Miller 16th on your board. You were quite a bit higher on him than where he went in 24th, but um, I think these are all interesting names in the back half of the second round that, I wouldn't be surprised if one or two of these guys really takes off and, ends up being like a top 50 to 100 prospect, by the middle or end of the year.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Miller is my favorite of the bunch. A big third baseman draft, I will say.
Yeah.
He's kind of a strong guy, and makes a lot of good contact. Maybe not, yeah, maybe not the fastest guy. Um, could be end up being like a lumbering DH type, but he hits the ball well. And it is a really good draft for third baseman again, I gotta say, and I like Miller. You put him in as shortstop, but I've only seen him listed as a third baseman.
I um
Um,
I I did not write that in. I don't know who wrote him in as a shortstop, so I didn't type in the pick.
yeah,
I thought he was a third baseman, so I've been under that impression.
yeah, maybe he plays both. I'm not sure, but yeah, I like the rest of these guys. Namal is a good pick. Chase Davis is a good pick. These guys all kind of went right where I thought they would. Maybe even a little later than I thought they would because guys like guys like Dollander and even maybe Sean Noel a little bit um, went earlier than I would have expected, so I got pushed down a bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is a fun group, and I like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of these guys really pop off. One more name here in the second round. I guess we really did a good job of going through each of these players individually, but Noble Meyer, Eric took it 20, and I one of those situations where I feel like Eric just kind of sat where he was at, didn't really force anything, and just landed who was probably the best talent left on the board, especially at pitching. Like I think there was a pretty big drop off at the pitcher position after him. Um, Again, I don't fault anybody like the last four picks in those rounds, like all being really solid bats. Like if you're just not somebody who wants to draft high school pitchers, I totally get that. But I think from a pure talent perspective, I think Meyer was the most talented player left on the board, and Eric just snagged him at 20. I think that was lower than I thought he would go. So I thought that was a nice pick.
Yeah, I agree. Eric kind of has a tendency to stay where he is and end up watching the chaos around him unfold and getting a guy who's really solid. I mean, Matt shot seven, was best player available, and Eric got a really good one there. Looking back, I mean, last year he got Brooks Lee at seven, which was a great pick. After a little bit of chaos in front of him. Looking back even a little bit further at 2021, Nick Gonzalez at eight felt like a really good get for him. He just kind of he just kind of gets the guy who feels right all the time. He's maybe with the exception of Saya Suzuki at seven, I feel like Eric never reaches.
I don't. I think if you look back at the time to what we were saying about Suzuki, Suzuki at seven was the appropriate place to take him. My issue with Eric and Suzuki is he gave up on him for nothing like halfway through the season. When I think Suzuki's actually a really good asset, but that's my beef with him and Suzuki. Low key though, Eric knocked it out of the park in last year's draft. Brooks Lee, Spencer Jones, Kevin Parada, and Dalton Rushing. That's a great foursome right there.
Yeah, no, I agree. Kevin Parada, maybe not as highly regarded as he was this time last year. He didn't have the most amazing season in 2023, and he His strikeouts worry me a bit, and we're not sure if he can catch. He's probably not going to stick behind the plate. But the rest of those guys, I agree, he did well with.
Yeah, he didn't have as good of a season as I remembered him having, but yeah, that's fair. I think the other guys more to make up for it.
Mhm.
But yeah, any specific thoughts about Meyer? Or you ready to move on to the third round?
Yeah, let's move on to the third round, and we can kind of go quickly through
Yeah.
some of these names here. Yeah, Bradfield kind of went around where we thought he would. He's an interesting name. Ralphie Velasquez, I'm not super familiar with. Both of Daniel and Matt's picks at the end were a little bit weird. Ralphie Velasquez and Mike Bove, I'm not really familiar with. Mike Bove has already been cut.
These picks are interesting. I mean, I did a little research into Velasquez. I mean, I think he's a fine pick. I don't know if he's worth the 26 overall pick, but uh, I think he's fine there. I think Bo was. I don't know too much about Bo. I do think it's interesting that he was the second Milwaukee infielder off the board. I had the third Milwaukee infielder to go off the board much higher. Uh, on my personal board, that was Cooper Pratt. I took him with the last pick in the draft. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It almost feels like Daniel and Matt, didn't really want to use these picks. Like they have a sneaky solid farm, and I just you know they made kind of a concerted effort to trade out of this draft, right? They traded their first round pick to me, who I later traded for Albies, right? So like, um, you know, I don't really think they were thinking about this draft as really one that they were, you know, they obviously did their research, but not one where they were really like, hey, like these are going to be like some of our core guys, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. It just kind of seems like they yeah, didn't really put a ton of stock into this draft, and that's okay. Yeah, Bove, yeah, he's already been cut by them.
Yeah.
He's an interesting guy. I don't think he's at this point a guy um uh that I think is rosterable, and I guess neither do they.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But uh this is a good segue into the other white square. We already have t two yellow squares that are no longer yellow. Uh Ruthvik took Johandry Morales, but unlike Mike Bove, Johandry Morales is still on the roster and he's on your roster. This was one of the more interesting. I don't think we've seen this before, how this all played out. I'm gonna let you be the one to explain this, but this was a pretty cool moment. Why don't you explain the details here? Yeah.
Yeah, this I didn't know until you said it to me right before the recording, but this turned out to be the 600th ever trade in league history. And I think it's, unlike a lot of the round number trades, this one kind of lived up to that billing in terms of its intrigue. Um, Basically, I was picking 29th, Ruthvik was picking 28th. I was, feeling uh feeling like Yohani Morales was my pick. I was feeling like there wasn't really a guy after him that I was super thrilled about. But I like Morales' profile a lot. He's just kind of like, well, I described him to you earlier today as Brock Wilken Jr. Basically, just kind of the same exact profile, maybe a little bit more raw than Wilken, but just kind of the same, third base type. Maybe he moves to first base in the future. Third base type, got a lot of power, but also does not strike out a lot. I think that turned out to be a profile I targeted in this draft, whether intentionally or unintentionally. A lot of boards are super high on him. I had him uh, 21st on my board, so ahead of even a lot of the late second round guys who went. Um, so I was pretty excited to take him there. Um, I was very bummed that Ruthvik took him one spot before me, and I looked through the options. For who I could take, I considered a couple names that we'll talk about later. Um, we'll talk about him now. I considered George Lombard Jr. was probably who I would have taken next, and he ended up getting undrafted at all. I almost picked him up, but decided I didn't couldn't spare a spot. Um,
I picked him up instead.
yeah, you picked him up instead. I considered taking Cooper Pratt, who is someone that you ended up taking, but I decided, you know what? I'm going to throw out a Hail Mary here. I asked Ruthvik what he wanted for Morales, or if he, uh, yeah, what he wanted from Morales. I told him that I could offer 29. Um, Let me pull up my exact chat here with him. I said, insane idea. What would you want in addition to pick 29 for Morales? He said, let me see any prospect or an outfielder. I fully expected him to just kind of not pick up the phone or not entertain this offer at all. But he said, a prospect or an outfielder. I said, hey, George Valera is both of those things. He said he's down. I announced it. George Valera is someone I would have just cut anyway. So I essentially became the first person ever to acquire a player who was drafted in this draft before the draft ended. This is the first trade of a drafted player before the draft ended. I essentially got unsniped by for free, and I thought that was kind of great.
Yeah, that was definitely, I think, one of the coolest moments of the draft. Not quite Heliot Ramos getting cut, but I think this was definitely second in my heart. Uh, yeah, I think the trader in me is very proud of you for how this goes down. And hey, if you make more trades like this, maybe I'd have less critiques of your roster. So, um, yeah, I thought
I
it worked
I
out.
think I've always been good at working on the margins with trades like this.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I'll give you credit where it's due, but I think you lack creativity at times, where you used to have more creativity, and this had a lot of creativity. So, uh,
Don't we all?
yes, I am proud of you. But uh, so Ruthvik trades for 29. I think it ends up being very interesting what he does with not only 29, but his other picking around. He had 32. He took Woosuck Go with 29, and then he took Yuki at 32. Yuki Matsui, both uh, Padres relievers that they signed um, to compete for the closer's job. I think we both mentioned that, hey, maybe somebody takes a gamble at them in the end of the third round if they think they're going to be the closer. I, I don't love him picking two of them. And like, and again, maybe this is just because I think Suarez is going to start the year as the closer. Like, I think he just drafted two middle relievers, uh, or not middle relievers. I think one of them. I think I'm relatively confident that Matsui is going to be a setup guy to start the year, but I think Go could be a middle reliever, to start the season with those two picks, and I feel like those assets could have been used a little bit better. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I tend to agree. Picking both of them feels a little bit weird to me. I guess he's yeah trying to take a closer towards the end of the draft and kind of trying to hedge his bets a little bit. Trying to Austin hedge his Mookie bets. Um, I hope you're
Well
proud of
done.
that one.
Well done.
Um,
I'm so proud of you.
but the interesting thing here, I was thinking, oh, maybe he's trying to get a closer. I think Ruthvik's maybe got the best bullpen in the league to begin with. Um, he's got, you know, one, two, three, four, five, six guys who are going to be saving games this year already on his major league roster. And now he just drafted someone. One of the two of them is going to probably by the end of the season be saving games. So that, I don't know, save some for the rest of us, man.
It's Ruthvik. If there's one thing I know that he's going to do, it's he's going to draft an inordinate amount of pitching and trade for an inordinate amount of pitching, and he's just going to dump all his bats. And that's what he did. And I'm going to complain about it, and then it's going to lead to another semis appearance. I'm not going to totally understand it, but it ends up working. So. Uh, I do think, and kind of the same way with Dollander and Connor, where I was like, hey, you kind of have to read the room a little bit. Once he took one of them, and I would have taken Matsui first because Matsui got the bigger contract, which implies that the Padres have a little more faith in him. Once you take one, I didn't think somebody else was going to take the second one. I would have just taken I would have been fine if he just took his favorite of the two and then used the second pick on somebody else. Like fine, whatever. But it's a decent gamble, on a potential closer, and then he also got a prospect. His farm system is in the bottom half of the league. I think that could use some work. Um, I didn't see the need to take both. It just felt like an inefficient use of assets. And I think he could have added the second one in free agency. But maybe I'm wrong
Yeah,
about that. I could
no,
be totally off base.
I agree. I think, yeah, his prospects, and he's kind of been trying to do the thing that Eric sometimes does, but maybe not as much as he used to, where he tries to get major league ready guys who are prospect eligible in that prospect sheet, and kind of stash them there as extra major league spots to kind of try out guys. He's got Keaton Wynn. He picked up James MacArthur. I mean, the two guys he picked up there. Um, he Sawyer Gibson Long. Yeah, I think there's a lot of very cuttable guys in this farm system, and uh, that he could have, uh, you know, picked one of those guys, or picked a Cooper Pratt, or picked a George Lombard Jr. over both Padres international reliever signings.
Exactly. And I will say too, I think this year's draft was deeper than previous years. So a lot of these guys who were going at the end of the third round, and I also think the way the draft board went too. Um, I think there were a lot of guys that I would have taken in a late second round, early third round that slipped to the end of the draft, and even a couple that slipped into free agency. I mean, you would have taken George Lombard at 29. He ended up not getting drafted, right? There's a couple other names like that. I want to talk about one of these names in a second that I took really late that I was surprised went that late. I mean, Cooper Pratt is another one too at 36. Like I just yeah, I don't get it, but we'll see. What
Yeah, we
maybe
will
go
see.
as a closer, and I'm eating crow, but it felt weird.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. But yes, any other third round picks that we want to briefly go into? You
Yeah,
made three at the end.
I kind of alluded to uh a guy who I thought I was surprising go earlier, and that was Walker Martin. So Martin, he's coming off an insane senior year of high school. He feels he So the Giants drafted him in a second round, but they signed him to like a first round bonus. I think they're trying to get him off a commitment. I think he was going to go play both football and baseball in college, but they got him off that commitment. One of those guys where the physical tools I think are really strong, but it's one of those, hey, can you kind of put it all together? I saw in a lot of places like people thinking that he was going to kind of be like a top 20 to 25 FIPD guy. Um, and I think I would have taken him at 24 if the board had fallen that way and felt pretty solid about it. So for me to get him at 34 felt like a no-brainer. I traded back with Andrew to go get him. Now it's one of those things where all the tools have to come together. So I think he is a higher risk prospect than some of the other guys that I drafted. Certainly more, I think, than Cooper Pratt and Matt Horvath and Aiden Miller. But I really like the upside, and I'm excited to see what the Giants can do with him. And at 34, I mean, if he ends up busting, I think it's a pretty negligible, you know, it's kind of whatever. But like I did not see any of the big prospect guys have him below like the 20 to 25 range on their boards, and some of them even a little higher than that. So I was surprised to see him that low.
Yeah, I saw some lists where he was lower. I think Fantrax isn't super high on him. I kind of had him somewhere in, yeah, kind of the early third round range. So you did decently well getting him down where you got him.
Yeah, and I think him and again I'm biased. These were my picks, but I think him and Pratt could end up being two of the more underrated guys that won that round, and obviously Mac Horvath too. Uh, I told you after I drafted him, I thought that Horvath is arguably the better dynasty prospect than Enrique Bradfield Jr., who the Orioles drafted and before Horvath. I'm a big fan of his. Obviously, he went to UNC, so that's a little extra bonus for me. But he was somebody I was targeting uh, pretty heavily throughout the pre-draft process. And a little hat tip to Daniel and Matt here. It looked like they were going to take him. Daniel just out of the blue starts announcing that he's going to take Mac, and he's like, "Wait, it's not my pick." So that's when I traded for 31 with EVO. And I was debating between Horvath and Walker Martin there, and I was like, "Well, I know Horvath is going to go at 33 to Daniel and Matt if I don't take him." So I ended up taking Horvath there, even though I had him lower on my board than Walker Martin. So. Um, uh, I was
Yeah.
excited with that pick.
No, that is funny that Daniel announced a pick when he did not have a pick, and I wonder if that kind of went into him kind of frantically scrambling and taking Mike Bove.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me if he just had a couple of names at the bottom there. I mean, honestly, I was kind of in the same boat. I didn't have early picks, so I didn't do a lot of the early scouting, but I had like a list of like 6 to 8 names of players that I wanted and just kind of went from there. So kind of had an idea of where I thought they were going to go. So I wonder if that's kind of where he was at.
Probably. But yeah, any other draft picks, we've pretty much gone through it. I correctly um, made a prediction off air that Gino Groover would get drafted. You thought that he would not, and I was right about that.
Did you
Um,
not include that in the podcast? I think we talked about that at the
I think
end.
it might have been on air. I
Okay.
hope it was for evidence sake.
Yeah.
Um, I
I can confirm you did say that, and I said there's no way in hell he gets drafted.
Yeah, no, I was right. He's kind of a borderline guy, and I thought that the name would boost him. Speaking of borderline guys that I thought would be boosted by a variety of factors, Kevin McGonigal, you know, he's a borderline guy. I had him as I had him 29th on my board. Um, I think he's a really interesting prospect, but not only that, he's a Tiger and he's got a funny name. And not only has he not was he not drafted like I thought he'd be, he still has not been picked up. So that's kind of surprising to me. Kind of a lot of factors that made me feel like he should have been drafted and he did not.
I was a little surprised not to see him go. I guess there weren't a ton of Tigers fans picking towards the end of the draft, and I wonder if like EBO held like the 36 pick or something, if they would have taken McGonagall or what they traded out of 31. And I wonder, I know for a fact that's not who they wanted at 31. So little story here. Before EVO traded me that pick, Zane was like, "Hey, just curious, are you going to take Colin Houck?" And I was like, "No, Houck's not a consideration here." Um, Me not really thinking about it at the time. He was talking to somebody else about the pick, so I thought the other person was thinking about taking Houck. Then come to realize when Zane picked up Houck yesterday that like actually he really wanted Houck, or he said Sully really wanted him. So, um, but I thought maybe McGonagall could have gone there. But I guess for all of their homerism at times, Zane and Sully put together very meticulous rankings, and they don't often deviate from that board. So.
They do. I would love to see their draft board. I kind of have kind of revealed most of mine over the course of this recap. And I always enjoy making a board. I would love to see Zane's board because I bet he goes into great detail on it.
Yeah, you know what? There's actually one thing I want to talk about here. Actually, and I'll say I don't think they put together a board. I think they mentioned early in the draft before you got there that Sully was responsible for putting together the board and then got busy and just didn't. So they were drafting off of vibes. I'm like 90% sure that's what they said.
No,
But
no.
one thing I wanted to bring up that you were not on the air for, so EBO took Dylan Cruz at 4. Um, but Sully really wanted Paul Skeens. Uh, as part of their whole, hey, they really want pitching. And I know that they talked about when they drafted Lauder and Imanaga that like they were targeting pitching that they thought was relatively major league ready or could get to the majors quickly. I wonder if I'm not saying that this was, this is a far-fetched scenario to ever happen, but like let's say if Anthony took Walker Jenkins at 3, if Paul Skeens and Dylan Cruz were both on the board at 4, I think there's a decent chance they would have taken Skeens and not Dylan Cruz.
That is interesting. So that means we could have seen Dylan Cruz drop quite a bit potentially.
I think he would have gone at 5 in that scenario. I think Yuki would have rushed up to make that pick. But that's I I'm not surprised that Anthony took Skeens over Cruz because like he's a pirate, right? I'd much rather have Cruz than Skeens, but like I get it. Uh, I just didn't expect there to be multiple teams who thought that. And I wonder if maybe EBO has them similarly ranked and their tiebreaker would have been like, hey, we have a ton of outfielders. What we really need is pitching. So we're gonna take need here, even if he's slightly lower or equal on the board. But man, I was all on the Cruz hype train. I just like again, and I said this last episode too, like I don't think Cruz did anything wrong in between when he got drafted and now. He was the top baseball player to go into Gallardo draft. It just so happened that Wyatt Langford went batshit crazy and that Yamamoto got signed by the Dodgers, right? Like, if neither of those things happen, we'd be talking about Cruz as the number 1 overall pick right now, I think, and that Alex and Zach made a fantastic pick and that they got one of the best prospects in baseball. So I don't know. I was a little surprised about that, but I wanted to throw that tidbit out there.
Yeah, I'd love to see Wyatt Langford and Dylan Cruz kind of go toe to toe, kind of be compared to each other um over the next 20 years, kind of like Acuna and Soto have been a little bit, kind of come up around the same time and just be two faces of a generation.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that this is definitively going to happen or anything, but would you be surprised if we're talking what it's the end of January now? So let's say 5, 6 months from now, and Cruz is ahead of Langford in the in everybody's rankings. Like I wouldn't be.
Yeah, I could totally see that happening.
Yeah, so like yeah, that's why I really think EBO got a good deal at 4 because of that. So speaking of that, I think it's a good segue into picking some of the draft awards.
Yeah,
Uh
so we have already kind of spoiled the Kyler Murray Award for the best draft moment. Of course, that is Heliot Ramos getting cut.
Thank
Um,
fucking God. You know what? Like I'm there are moments in league history I'm gonna remember for the rest of my life, and I'm gonna remember where I was when Ruthvik finally cut Heliot Ramos. Like it's just so long overdue. So
mhm,
long overdue.
No, absolutely. I wouldn't say this is a moment I'm going to remember for the rest of my life, but I
I'm
think
exaggerating, Cam. Just let me have it. Jesus Christ.
I think it's certainly, something we've been waiting on for a while. I think well, of course, yeah, just looking back at the previous winners last year, EBO Trading picked number one, won the award. 2022, the inaugural Kyler Murray Award for Best Draft Moment was me picking the wrong name at number three. Of course, some runners up for this award would be, I guess, me trading for Morales one pick after he got taken, and we also mentioned the um, the whole thing with Daniel saying Matt Corvath when he was not picking. Um, and I also mentioned, Zane benching Joel Embiid and Gallardo and kind of coming to terms with that when he had a 75-point game or whatever. Um, that was kind of a little storyline throughout the draft, but I think nothing was beating Heliot Ramos getting cut.
Yeah, no, I am with you there. Um, Obvious moment. I don't think anything else needs to be said there. Um, and then we have the other award. Do you want to reveal who that is? Also our finalists for that award.
Yeah, so the Jose Peraza Award for Best Draft. Um, this is the team that drafts the best. We gave it to EBO in both 21 and 22. And we gave it to Eric last year. Um, I think in retrospect, kind of looking back, 2021, maybe uh, hard to say. That was a uh, tough one to judge. I think you probably would have gotten the award in retrospect in 2021.
Hey,
As for 22, um, that's a tough one as well.
that's a pretty good draft for me too. Colton Cowser, Harry Ford, Connor Norby, Zach Geloff, and Jordan Wicks.
That's fair. I'm tempted to give it to Yuki in retrospect. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Meyer, Triantos, Carson Williams at 14 is great. Tyler Black at 33. Will Bednar is okay. I don't love him. So I think retrospectively and 2023, I kind of want to give it to myself in retrospect. Uh,
Neto.
Neto is Neto, Yoshida, Lesko, and Jet Williams at 24. I like a lot. I guess with a shout out, I think Eric's draft still looks great in hindsight. I think um, Alex and Zach getting Jackson Holiday at number one, even though they didn't make a single other pick, could put them number one by default.
No, that
Uh,
that that literally is such a mic drop moment that like I would do that like in a heartbeat. I think it's them. Who,
mhm.
who, who do we pick last year? Oh, Eric, right?
We
Okay.
picked Eric, which his draft still holds up.
You know who's kind of busted? Anthony's. I mean, he had two of the top four picks, but it's like he took the wrong players up there. Like granted, there's time, but Drew Jones and Elijah Green did not have good years.
No, I agree. That's Elijah Green has fell down a lot of boards. Drew Jones is still fine. Yeah, not the best year from him either though.
Chase Young makes up for it quite a bit, though.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Um so that brings us to the 2024 award. Finalists here, I guess going in order from when they made their first pick. Our finalists we had uh I guess we had Jake, EBO, me, and Andrew were kind of the four teams we singled out. Um, I would say, and this year we kind of narrowed it down from there to Jake and EBO, and it was very close, but we decided to give it to Jake this year. His draft, getting Yamamoto at 2, getting a major league ready ace in the draft is huge. Getting Tommy Troy at 15 as a just falling into his lap there is fantastic. And we like Chase Davis too. We decided that was uh best draft. Congratulations, Jake. Two-time defending league champion and now one-time defending Jose Peraza award winner.
Yeah, I'll go on the record and say that you and I discussed this quite a bit. You were kind of on Jake I was more on EBO, and my logic for EBO was I thought Dylan Cruz falling into their lap at 4 was a huge win when I think he could have gone a lot higher. It also helped that they had the extra pick, and I liked them getting Imanaga at 17. I thought Max Clark at 6 was appropriate, whereas I thought Yamamoto kind of went exactly where we thought he would at 2. So my criteria for winning was less like, hey, like you got him where they were expected to go, whereas like, hey, EBO was a big winner for having uh like a top 5, top 10 prospect fall to them where I didn't think they would. But for me, it was basically neck and neck, and I kind of told you like, hey, I don't really have like a strong opinion one way or another. Like if I could give them like co-best draft awards, like I would, because I think they're basically even. I think EBO had the narrow tiebreaker for the reasons I just said, but like yeah, I mean, Jake killed it this draft. I think Yamamoto is going to be great for his rotation. I already said I thought Tommy Troy could have gone 5 picks higher, and I thought that would have been fine. And I told Jake off air, like I was prepared to take Chase Davis at 24 if he took Miller, or if I had kept 23, like Chase Davis would have been one of the 2 picks there. So great job by Jake.
Yeah, absolutely. Great job by Jake here. And yeah, great job by everyone. Another really exciting draft. Um, yeah, just one of the best ones we've had in years. It lived up to, like I said, the hype going in. I know it's been kind of quiet in the league lately, but we really all kind of showed up for the draft and had a great time.
Yeah, no, good to see some activity, and I think it spurred a little action. There's been some trade talks and stuff after the draft. I think people doing some more planning for the season. I think, people are kind of set with their, hockey teams, basketball teams, kind of the position that they're at. So I think people are starting to get back in the swing of things for baseball.
That's
Hopefully,
funny. I'm close to a couple hockey blockbusters.
interesting. Meanwhile, I forgot to set my lineup yesterday because of the Harbaugh news. So I'm playing a little catch up there. But yeah. Anything else you would like to add before we wrap up our draft episode?
No, that is everything. Just we've been saying it for 3 months now, but awards are soon. So stay tuned for that. And stay tuned for the rest of the offseason. We still got a lot of fun stuff planned. Now that we're kind of back on more of a weekly schedule.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I am excited, and yeah, can't wait to get back on a more regular schedule. And yeah, see y'all next week.
All right, see you next week.
This podcast is good.